Picture a man who held absolute power over the mightiest empire the world had ever seen. His word could condemn thousands to death or spare entire nations. Armies marched at his command, and the known world trembled at his name. Yet, this man chose to spend his nights writing philosophy by candlelight in military camps, reflecting on human nature and the meaning of existence. This is the story of Marcus Aurelius, the last of Rome's 5 good emperors, a leader who walked a remarkable path between two worlds: the harsh reality of imperial power and the serene wisdom of philosophical contemplation. Imagine yourself in ancient Rome, around the year 161 after Christ. The empire stretches from the sands of Egypt to the misty shores of Britain. At its helm stands a man unlike any other ruler before him. While his predecessors built monuments to their glory, Marcus Aurelius built monuments in the minds of men. While they sought to conquer foreign lands, he sought to conquer himself. But here's what makes his story truly fascinating. Marcus never wanted to be emperor. As a young boy, he dreamed of being a philosopher, spending his days in quiet contemplation. Fate, however, had grander plans for him. When Emperor Hadrian chose him as a potential heir to the throne, Marcus's life changed forever. What happens when a reluctant philosopher becomes the most powerful man in the world? How does someone maintain their humanity while wielding absolute power? These questions weren't just academic exercises for Marcus. They were the daily challenges he faced while defending an empire under siege. From the blood-soaked battlefields of Germania, where he fought savage tribes threatening Rome's borders, to the quiet hours before dawn when he wrote his famous Meditations, Marcus Aurelius showed us something extraordinary: that true power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering ourselves. Would you like to know how this warrior philosopher's wisdom still echoes through time, shaping leaders and thinkers even today? How his personal diary, never meant for publication, became one of history's most influential books? Join us as we unravel the fascinating tale of the philosopher who became an emperor, and the emperor who never stopped being a philosopher. Stay with us until the end to discover how Marcus Aurelius faced plague, betrayal, and war while maintaining his humanitarian principles. And if you're as fascinated by ancient wisdom as we are, don't forget to subscribe to Imperium Chronicles, where we bring history's greatest stories back to life. Let's begin our journey into the life of a man who proved that true greatness lies not in the power we wield, but in how we choose to wield it. In the year 121, in the eternal city of Rome, a child was born into a life of extraordinary privilege. This boy, Marcus Aurelius, would one day become not just an emperor, but a philosopher whose words would echo through millennia. But how does a child of nobility transform into a ruler of wisdom? Unlike many Roman nobles who spent their youth hunting and reveling, young Marcus found himself drawn to something quite different. While other children his age played with wooden swords, he would often be found in his room at dawn, sleeping on the bare floor, a practice he learned from his first philosophical mentor, Diognetus. The death of his father when Marcus was just 3 years old set in motion a chain of events that would shape his destiny. Emperor Hadrian, with his keen eye for talent, saw something special in the young boy. In a masterful move of Roman politics, Hadrian arranged for Marcus to be adopted by Antoninus Pius, his chosen successor. This wasn't just any adoption. This was a calculated decision to groom the future of the empire. Antoninus Pius proved to be more than just an adoptive father. He handpicked the finest minds in the empire to educate Marcus. Among these brilliant teachers was Junius Rusticus, a man who would change Marcus's life forever. It was Rusticus who placed in Marcus's hands a copy of the teachings of Epictetus, the former slave turned Stoic philosopher. Imagine the scene: a young noble, destined to rule the known world, poring over the words of a former slave, finding in them not contradiction but profound truth. But Marcus's education wasn't confined to philosophy alone. He studied law with Lucius Volusius Maecianus, rhetoric with Herodes Atticus, and Greek with Marcus Cornelius Fronto. These weren't just academic exercises, they were preparing him for the immense responsibility that lay ahead. His letters to Fronto, which survive to this day, reveal a young man eager to learn, deeply thoughtful, and surprisingly humble. What made Marcus truly unique was how he viewed his position. While his peers saw power as a right to rule over others, Marcus saw it differently. In his private writings, he would later reflect that position and privilege were not rewards, but responsibilities. Power, in his eyes, wasn't about wearing purple robes or commanding armies. It was about serving others. Think about this. In a time when emperors were known for their excesses, here was a young man who chose to sleep on the ground, study philosophy, and rise before dawn to meditate on his duties. While others trained to conquer foreign lands, Marcus trained to conquer himself. The making of this philosopher-king wasn't just about education, it was about transformation. Each teacher, each lesson, each early morning meditation shaped him into something Rome had rarely seen. A ruler who would lead not through fear, but through wisdom. A leader who understood that true power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering oneself. This was the foundation that would prepare Marcus Aurelius for the immense challenges ahead, challenges that would test not just his ability to rule, but his commitment to the philosophical principles he held dear. And as history would prove, this unusual education would create not just an emperor, but a sage whose wisdom continues to guide leaders and thinkers to this day. The year 161 marked the beginning of what would become one of the most challenging reigns in Roman history. As Marcus Aurelius ascended to the throne, he did something unprecedented. He chose to share his power with his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus. This wasn't just tradition or mere kindness, it was practical wisdom. Marcus understood that the empire was too vast for one man to manage alone, but fate had other plans. Just as the two emperors settled into their roles, disaster struck. Roman troops returning from campaigns in the east brought with them an invisible enemy, what we now call the Antonine Plague. Some historians believe it was smallpox, others suggest measles, but whatever its true nature, its effects were devastating. Picture the streets of Rome, markets empty, homes sealed, funeral pyres burning day and night. The plague showed no mercy, claiming rich and poor alike. In some cities, nearly a third of the population perished. The dead were so numerous that Marcus had to regulate funeral processions and burial practices by imperial decree. He even provided state funds to help the poor bury their dead, an act of compassion rare for his time. But nature wasn't done testing Rome's philosopher-emperor. As the empire struggled with the plague, Germanic tribes saw their opportunity. The Marcomanni, Quadi, and other northern peoples crossed the Danube River, threatening to overrun the empire's northern frontier. This wasn't just another border skirmish. This was the most serious threat Rome had faced in nearly 3 centuries. Many expected Marcus to do what other emperors had done before, remain in Rome, sending generals to fight while he enjoyed the comforts of the palace. Instead, he chose a different path. Despite having no military experience, Marcus packed up his imperial court and headed to the front lines. For the next 14 years, he would spend more time in military camps than in his palace in Rome. It was during these long, cold nights on the frontier that something remarkable happened. In his tent by lamplight, Marcus began writing what would become his masterpiece, the Meditations. These weren't grand philosophical treatises meant for publication. They were personal notes, reminders to himself about staying true to his principles in the face of overwhelming challenges. Think about this for a moment. Here was the most powerful man in the known world, facing plague, war, and the potential collapse of his empire, taking time each night to reflect on wisdom and virtue. He wrote about accepting what we cannot change, finding strength in adversity, and maintaining compassion even for our enemies. The best revenge, he wrote, is to be unlike him who performed the injury. The situation was so dire that Marcus had to sell the imperial palace's treasures to fund the war effort rather than burden his people with new taxes. He personally supervised the recruitment of slaves, gladiators, and even bandits into the army. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Yet through it all, he remained committed to justice and mercy. When his generals captured thousands of Germanic tribespeople, instead of executing them, as was common practice, Marcus settled them within the empire's borders as farmers and potential recruits for the army. This wasn't just humanity, it was practical leadership. What makes Marcus truly remarkable is not just that he faced these crises, but how he faced them. While his empire reeled from plague and war, he didn't surrender to despair or rage. Instead, he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, obstacles became opportunities for growth and wisdom. His example raises a powerful question for leaders in any era. In times of crisis, do we abandon our principles for expedience, or do we hold even more firmly to our values? Marcus chose the latter, proving that true leadership isn't about avoiding crises. It's about how we face them. History has shown us that power often corrupts, turning even the most promising rulers into tyrants. But what happens when you put a philosopher on the throne of the world's most powerful empire? Marcus Aurelius gave us the answer, and it's a story that challenges everything we think we know about power and leadership. While his predecessors built monuments to their glory, Marcus built something far more lasting, a philosophy of leadership based on humility and self-control. Each morning, before the sun rose over the 7 hills of Rome, while others still slept in their silk-covered beds, the emperor would rise, dress simply, and begin his daily practice of self-reflection. But make no mistake, this wasn't some detached philosopher lost in abstract thoughts. Marcus faced challenges that would break most people. Imagine losing not 1, but 8 of your children. Each loss would have been enough to drive many to despair. Yet Marcus found strength in his Stoic principles. He wrote in his personal journals, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What made Marcus truly extraordinary was how he handled the practical demands of running an empire. When the treasury ran low during the Germanic wars, he faced a choice that many emperors before him had encountered. The easy path would have been to raise taxes, burdening the common people. Instead, he did something unprecedented. He ordered a 2-month auction of the imperial palace's treasures. Precious jewels, gold vessels, even his wife's silk robes, all sold to fund the defense of the empire. Think about that for a moment. The most powerful man in the world, choosing to sell his own possessions rather than take from his people. This wasn't just good politics. It was philosophy in action. As he wrote, "What is not good for the swarm is not good for the bee." His daily life in the palace defied imperial traditions. While other emperors surrounded themselves with flatterers and lived in excessive luxury, Marcus maintained simple habits. He would often sleep on the floor, eat plain food, and spend hours listening to the problems of common citizens. There's a story of him spending 12 hours straight hearing cases, refusing to leave until the last petition was heard. But perhaps his greatest test was dealing with betrayal. When one of his most trusted generals, Avidius Cassius, declared himself emperor and seized control of Egypt, everyone expected Marcus to respond with typical Roman brutality. Instead, he prepared to negotiate. Before he could reach Egypt, Cassius was killed by his own men. When they brought Cassius's head to Marcus, he refused to look at it and ordered it buried with honor. He even protected Cassius's family from reprisals. This wasn't weakness. It was strength of a different kind. As he wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In a world where power meant the ability to destroy your enemies, Marcus defined it as the ability to show mercy. His Stoic principles weren't just personal beliefs, they shaped how he governed. When plague ravaged the empire, he ensured state funds were used for mass burials, preventing an even worse health crisis. During food shortages, he opened the imperial granaries to the public. These weren't just acts of charity, they were expressions of his philosophy that a ruler's duty was to serve, not to be served. What makes Marcus's story so powerful is that he proved something remarkable. It is possible to hold absolute power without being corrupted by it. In a position where he could have anything he wanted only to do what was right. As he reminded himself, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. His legacy challenges us to this day. In an era of leaders who boast about their power, Marcus shows us that true strength lies in self-mastery. While others sought to control the world, he focused on controlling himself. And in doing so, he became something rare in history, a good man who stayed good in power. The year was 166 when the relative peace of Rome's northern frontier shattered. The Marcomanni, along with a confederation of Germanic tribes, didn't just cross the Danube River. They smashed through Rome's defenses, penetrating deeper into the empire than any force since Hannibal centuries before. They even reached as far as northern Italy, threatening the city of Aquileia. Rome hadn't faced such a crisis in generations. For Marcus Aurelius, this wasn't just another border skirmish. This was a test that would define his reign and challenge every principle he held dear. Picture this: a philosopher-emperor more comfortable with books than swords, forced to become a warrior. The irony wasn't lost on him. He who wrote about peace now had to wage war. The situation was dire. The Roman army, already weakened by the Antonine Plague, faced an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. The Marcomanni, Quadi, Iazyges, and other tribes formed a formidable alliance. In the harsh winters along the Danube, Marcus personally led his troops. He slept in the same conditions as his soldiers, ate their simple food, and shared their hardships. There's a remarkable story from these campaigns that few people know. During one particularly fierce battle, Marcus found himself cut off from his main force. The Germanic warriors, realizing who he was, focused their attack on the emperor. His personal guard was overwhelmed, and for a moment it seemed Rome would lose its emperor on the battlefield. But Marcus, despite having no formal military training, rallied his remaining men and fought his way back to safety. Later, in his writings, he would reflect not on the glory of battle, but on how close we all are to death at any moment. For 14 grueling years, the wars continued. The fighting was brutal, with victories and setbacks on both sides. But what made Marcus unique among Roman emperors was his approach to victory. When Roman forces finally gained the upper hand, many of his generals called for the traditional Roman response: massacre the defeated tribes as an example to others. It would have been easy, even expected, for Marcus to order such brutality. Instead, he did something revolutionary. Rather than annihilating the defeated tribes, he offered them something unprecedented: a chance to become part of the empire. He settled thousands of former enemies within Roman territories, giving them land to farm and opportunities to join the Roman army. Some of his advisors thought this was madness, bringing the enemy inside their borders. But Marcus saw further than they did. This wasn't just mercy, it was brilliant strategy. By integrating these tribes into the empire, he turned potential enemies into stakeholders in Rome's success. He understood something profound: that sustainable peace comes not from destroying your enemies, but from turning them into allies. There's a fascinating detail from these campaigns that shows Marcus's unique leadership style. During one siege, his troops were dying of thirst. His generals advised him to retreat. Instead, he knelt and prayed in front of his army. According to the story, a sudden thunderstorm broke out, saving his forces. The troops hailed it as divine intervention, but Marcus credited the resilience of his men. Even in victory, he remained humble. When his armies triumphed, he didn't build grand arches or mint coins celebrating the slaughter of barbarians as other emperors had done. Instead, he focused on strengthening the frontier and establishing diplomatic relations with the tribes beyond. Perhaps the most telling moment came near the end of the wars. When one of the tribal chiefs was brought before him in chains, expecting execution, Marcus instead offered him citizenship and a position in the Roman administration. This chief later became one of Rome's most loyal allies. The Marcomannic Wars tested more than Rome's military might. They tested Marcus's philosophy. Could Stoic principles survive the brutality of warfare? Could mercy exist alongside military necessity? Marcus proved they could. As he wrote during these campaigns, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." His leadership during these wars offers a timeless lesson. True strength isn't found in the ability to destroy, but in the courage to show mercy when you have the power to destroy. In an era when most leaders saw brutality as strength, Marcus showed that wisdom and compassion could be more powerful than the sword. What makes this story so relevant today is how it challenges our assumptions about power and leadership. In a world that often sees compromise as weakness and vengeance as justice, Marcus's example reminds us that the truly strong leader is one who can choose peace when war would be easier. The final chapter of Marcus Aurelius's life reads like a Greek tragedy. In the year 180, in a military camp near present-day Vienna, the philosopher-emperor lay dying, not in Rome's marble palaces, but in a simple soldier's quarters on the empire's cold frontier. His last days were spent not in comfort, but doing what he had always done, serving his duty. Those who were present during his final hours recorded a scene both moving and profound. As fever consumed him, Marcus called his closest advisors and his son Commodus to his bedside. Even then, facing death, he remained true to his Stoic principles. He reminded them that death was natural, nothing to fear. His final words to his son were not about power or glory, but about duty and virtue. There's a particularly poignant detail from these last moments. When the tribune came for the daily password, Marcus whispered, "Equanimity." Even at the end, he taught by example, facing death with the same calm philosophy he had lived by. Then, in a final gesture that spoke volumes about his character, he turned his face to the wall, as if simply going to sleep, and passed from this world. But fate has a way of writing ironies into history. Marcus, who had spent his life preparing to be a good ruler, had also tried to prepare his son Commodus for the same role. Yet in this one crucial matter, the great teacher failed. Commodus would prove to be everything his father was not: cruel where Marcus was kind, self-indulgent where Marcus was disciplined, tyrannical where Marcus was just. Within months of Marcus's death, Commodus abandoned his father's campaigns, rushed back to Rome, and began undoing decades of careful leadership. He sold offices to the highest bidder, executed senators on whims, and even renamed Rome after himself. The man who styled himself as the new Hercules would eventually be assassinated in his bath, ending the Antonine dynasty in disgrace. Yet here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. While Commodus destroyed much of his father's practical achievements, he couldn't touch Marcus's true legacy: his words. The personal notes Marcus had written in his tent during campaigns, never intended for publication, would survive to become one of history's most influential texts on leadership and personal character. These writings, known to us as meditations, would travel far beyond Rome's borders and far beyond his time. Frederick the Great of Prussia carried a copy during his campaigns. Union General William Tecumseh Sherman read it during the American Civil War. Modern leaders from Bill Clinton to James Mattis have cited its influence on their leadership philosophy. What makes this survival so remarkable is that Marcus never intended his writings for anyone else's eyes. These were personal reminders, written in Greek, not Latin, often late at night after long days of battle or government. His most famous line, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one," wasn't a public proclamation. It was a reminder to himself. Think about that for a moment. While other emperors built monuments to ensure their immortality, Marcus's most lasting monument was a private diary. While they inscribed their achievements in stone, he wrote wisdom on perishable scrolls. Yet his words outlasted their monuments. There's a fascinating detail about how the meditations survived. The last known ancient copy was almost lost during the sack of Rome by the Goths. A quick-thinking scholar rescued it, and through various translations and hand-copied manuscripts, it eventually reached the Renaissance world, where it found new life. The bitter irony of Marcus's end, dying far from home, his practical achievements soon undone by his son, is transformed by this greater legacy. While Commodus could undo his father's policies, he couldn't undo his wisdom. While the empire Marcus worked so hard to protect would eventually fall, his thoughts about duty, honor, and the proper use of power would inspire leaders for thousands of years. Perhaps this is the final lesson of Marcus's life. True legacy isn't found in monuments or even in empires, but in the wisdom we leave behind. His last great teaching was unintentional, showing us that even when everything else is lost, ideas and principles endure. As he wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity." In his case, that echo still resonates, teaching new generations about leadership, duty, and what it means to be simply good. Nearly 2,000 years have passed since Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome, yet his influence seems to grow stronger with each passing year. In our modern world of constant notifications, social media anxiety, and endless crises, why does an ancient Roman emperor's wisdom resonate more powerfully than ever? Walk into any major bookstore today, and you'll find Marcus's Meditations not tucked away in the ancient history section, but prominently displayed among best-selling self-help books. Silicon Valley executives keep copies on their desks. Military officers study his principles of leadership. Professional athletes quote him on social media. How did this happen? The answer lies in something remarkable. Marcus faced challenges that, despite the passage of time, feel surprisingly familiar. He led during a pandemic that killed millions. He managed a complex organization facing constant crises. He dealt with anxiety, self-doubt, and the pressures of leadership. He struggled to maintain his principles in a world that often rewarded their abandonment. There's a fascinating story about a modern special forces commander who required all his officers to read Meditations during deployment. When asked why, he explained that Marcus's writings about maintaining clarity and ethical behavior under extreme pressure were more relevant to modern warfare than many contemporary military manuals. Corporate leaders have similarly embraced Marcus's teachings. His insights about handling setbacks. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way, have become mantras in boardrooms worldwide. One prominent CEO credits Marcus's writings with helping him navigate the 2008 financial crisis, noting that the emperor's words about maintaining composure amid chaos proved invaluable. But Marcus's relevance extends far beyond the executive suite. In recent years, psychological studies have begun confirming what he understood through observation and practice. His emphasis on separating what we can control from what we cannot has become a cornerstone of cognitive behavioral therapy. His insights about managing anxiety through perspective-taking are now backed by neurological research. Consider his famous advice. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, "The people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." Modern psychologists call this negative visualization, a powerful technique for managing expectations and reducing stress. Marcus was practicing mindfulness centuries before it became a global phenomenon. What makes his teachings particularly powerful today is their practicality. Unlike many philosophers who wrote abstract theories, Marcus offered concrete advice for daily living. When he wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself," he was sharing a principle he tested in the most demanding circumstances imaginable. The recent resurgence of interest in Stoicism, led by authors and speakers who have repackaged Marcus's ideas for modern audiences, isn't just a passing trend. It's a recognition that in our age of distraction and division, his emphasis on personal responsibility, ethical behavior, and mental discipline offers a much-needed antidote. There's an intriguing parallel between Marcus's time and ours. Like us, he lived in an era of rapid change, social upheaval, and technological advancement. The Roman Empire of his day was grappling with questions of identity, purpose, and meaning that feel startlingly contemporary. His response, focusing on what one can control while accepting what one cannot, speaks directly to our modern anxieties. Perhaps, most importantly, Marcus offers something rare in today's world: wisdom without dogma. He never claimed to have all the answers. His writings show him wrestling with doubts, acknowledging mistakes, and constantly striving to improve. This intellectual humility, combined with practical insight, makes his teachings accessible to people of all beliefs and backgrounds. His legacy lives on in unexpected ways. Medical schools use his writings to teach doctors about maintaining composure under pressure. Business schools study his leadership principles. Mindfulness apps quote his insights about managing thoughts and emotions. His words about facing mortality with dignity have comforted countless people dealing with loss. The true measure of Marcus's legacy isn't found in Roman ruins or history books. It's found in the countless lives still touched by his wisdom. When a stressed executive finds calm by reading his words, when a soldier draws courage from his example, when an ordinary person finds perspective through his insights, these are his real monuments. In a world that often seems to celebrate superficial success and instant gratification, Marcus Aurelius reminds us of deeper truths. He shows us that true power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering ourselves. That real success isn't measured by what we acquire, but by how we live. That in times of crisis, character matters more than circumstance. His enduring message, as relevant today as it was 2 millennia ago, is both simple and profound. Amid all of life's chaos and complexity, it's still possible to live with dignity, purpose, and wisdom. In that truth lies his greatest legacy. As our journey through the life of Marcus Aurelius comes to an end, we're left with a profound truth that echoes across nearly 2,000 years. True philosophy isn't confined to scrolls and lecture halls. It lives in our daily actions, in the choices we make when faced with adversity. Think about it. Here was a man who could have spent his days in the comfort of Rome's greatest palace, surrounded by luxury and entertainment. Instead, he chose to lead his armies from the front lines, spending cold nights in military camps, writing wisdom by candlelight that would outlive his empire. What makes Marcus Aurelius so remarkable isn't just that he was a philosopher who became emperor, but that he was an emperor who lived his philosophy. While others might have used power to indulge their darkest impulses, Marcus used it as a testing ground for his principles. In the face of plague, rebellion, and personal tragedy, he proved that Stoicism wasn't just beautiful theory. It was a practical guide for living. You know what's fascinating? Even today, his words reach across time to guide modern leaders, entrepreneurs, and anyone seeking wisdom in challenging times. His personal diary, which we know as Meditations, wasn't written for us. It was written as a reminder to himself. Yet somehow, these private thoughts became one of history's most enduring guides to living well. Marcus taught us that the greatest battlefield isn't out there in the world, it's within ourselves. Every day he fought the same battles we all face, against anger, against fear, against the temptation to take the easy path instead of the right one. And he won these battles not through supernatural strength, but through consistent practice and unwavering principles. As we close this chapter of Roman history, remember, the past isn't just a collection of dates and events. It's a treasury of human experience, filled with lessons that are as relevant today as they were 2 millennia ago. Marcus Aurelius showed us that true power isn't about controlling others, it's about mastering ourselves. And now, I'd love to hear from you. What resonated most with you from Marcus's story? Which of his teachings speaks to your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this journey through time, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that like button and subscribing to Imperium Chronicles. There are so many more fascinating stories from antiquity waiting to be told, and I can't wait to share them with you. Until next time, remember Marcus's words. Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one.